Welcome to the Happy Soul Podcast. My name is Melissa, and this is Sammy. We are diving deep into conversations that connect and inspire. Stories of resilience, triumph, and transformation. Stories that take us to the heart of human connection. Please note that opinions of our guests do not necessarily reflect those of this podcast. Please listen with your kindness and an open mind. Each story shared is authentic and vulnerable. Let's embrace our differences with empathy, knowing every voice enriches us. Together, let's cultivate a community of respect and curiosity. Thank you for listening. Now sit back, relax, and prepare to be inspired.
Welcome to the Happy Soul Podcast, everybody. Today it is Melissa and I, and we are here with Bryan St. Louis once again. Welcome back, Bryan. We're super jacked to have you back. We so enjoyed our first episode. Can't wait to dive into a second one.
Absolutely.
Last time on the Happy Soul, when we had Bryan here, we actually talked about a lot of the work he does in regards to radical empathy and speaking in schools, and it functions how to implement that between teachers, students, businesses, coaches, you name it. He's working there trying to help people understand basically the definition of radical empathy and how to implement that in our everyday lives. It's a really beautiful mission. We encourage you to go check out his Instagram or his website to learn more about that. We also know about Bryan that he has a backstory that kind of led into him wanting to speak about radical empathy, that motivated him and gave him a why as to why he wanted to encourage this and teach about this in schools, to businesses, to teachers, students, parents alike. And today, whatever way we listen to this, we are going to speak about that with Bryan. And from our understanding, that kind of leads back to a story about his daughter, Korneliah. And so, Bryan, we want to ask you about Korneliah and about Korneliah's story and how that led you into going into speaking about radical empathy in schools, and that being so heavy on your heart about why you want to teach about that.
Yeah, thank you again, Sammy. Thank you, Melissa, for having me on this podcast. Love it. Just really happy to be here. I do want to, even before we touch on Cornelia, I think there's something else that needs to be talked about because, and I don't remember if I did mention this before, but I think it's important to just the full story. So when I was 21, I think I did mention this before. When I was 21, I was working at a juvenile detention facility. And a lot of the youth there that I was working with, they had quite a lot of stories, to say the least. They had a lot of interesting past, and I'm using interesting in a very selective way because most of them were very traumatic. And I grew up pretty, I'm not even gonna lie, I grew up pretty judgmental in a sense where I saw people very black and white. It was just like, oh yeah, this is the life that you're supposed to live. This is what you're supposed to do. If I saw you live in a certain way, I was just like, you're just wrong. I didn't have this concept of understanding people as much, really to try to dive into understanding their perspective or why they are the way that they are. And so when I got into this position as a youth juvenile specialist, you were forced to learn about their situations, forced to learn about their why, and it just changed the whole perspective on how I saw life, how I saw people, and how I wanted to approach people with the work that I ever do from society at that point. And so from there, that's when, as we talked about before, I started working at the school. And that same approach, which I didn't necessarily coin it as radical empathy, but I lived it. That approach is what I started to take in and use and work with people, work with my students, work with even the people I was working with as staff members or my teachers. I remember my one of my teachers came to me after I had decided to move on and move into Canada. He told me he worked in education for, I think at the time he said 35 years. And I'm only a 28-year-old, like I was gonna say kid, but 28-year-old man at the time. And he told me, he said, working in education for 35 years, I've never had a leader. And this is like a 60-year-old man. He was like, I've never had a leader who actually looked out for us in such a way like you. And that touched me. Like I actually started like tearing up hearing that from a 60 plus year old man, being able to say that to a young guy like me. And uh and it really showed me that the approach that I took towards not just educating the kids, but also the approach that I had with the people that I was working or serving, because I think in leadership position you're serving at the end of the day, it made a massive difference for everyone around. So yeah, that was I just wanted to bring that in before I even talk about the backstory of Cornelia. I hope that was okay because
Absolutely.
it does give some more insights to what pretty much the story behind it as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
absolutely.
love that story. I love like I after our conversation the last time that the way you talk about understanding people
Mhm.
has stuck with me since our last conversation.
Oh
And
wow.
like it just I just think it's I just think it's really incredible. I think that really is something that's really important and something that we should all adopt a piece of, really. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I
that's
think
all.
it's easy when you're surrounded by whatever lifestyle you grow up with, whatever it may be. Everybody's different, but it's easy when you're surrounded by that to live in a situation of there is a right and a wrong.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And I know, like, even when you speak about that, I know for a long time I was very black and white, not about the same things probably, but about certain things of like, I don't understand why people do this and don't do this.
Hmm.
And then
Yep.
you learn that, like, not only do everybody grow up with different values and different beliefs, but also everybody grows up with a different perspective of the way the world works and
Hmm.
a different way of
Yeah.
processing the way the world works.
Hmm.
That's right. That's right.
And if we can't take a moment to try, and it's like you can't understand everybody's way, but if we try our best to remove our own emotional attachments from the way we see it and try to jump into somebody else's shoes, that's the only way that we can do that. So yeah, I loved when you spoke about that as well. So after that happened, after that changed your perspective on having radical empathy,
Yep.
on viewing other people's sides of things. How does that tie into the story with Cornelia?
Yeah, so basically when I was working as a teacher, administrator, basically, at the time, and then, took on the full role of administrator and principal of that school. I had a student that came into the school, and that student, from from the records that we had from his prior school, he wasn't a problematic student. He wasn't a student that had issues with his abilities, cognitive or anything of that nature. He was a bright kid, but he wasn't showing up to school anymore. Just wasn't showing up. And I'm like, okay, what's going on there? Like, didn't really fully get the picture.
Hmm.
I remember when we had the meeting with him, with the school, he said, I'm going to do everything that I can to show up every single day. And, you have your motivations, right? Of course, everyone has a desire. Everyone is motivated for a period of time, but then, that student, I'm like, yeah, I'm with you. And I told him, I remember word for word, I said, I'm going to do everything that I can to help you succeed. And I had to eat those words. Not eat, but you'll understand. He basically got to the place where his first 3 weeks of school, he just didn't show up. This was like around January of 2017. He just wasn't showing up. He showed up like maybe once or twice, and then the rest of those 3 weeks, he just did not show up. So, like, man, what's going on? So I have a parent meeting, and I drive to the home. I speak with him, with the family, and basically he explains to me the situation, which was the house that they had a very nice, beautiful property, and they had a house that was next door. And that house that's next door was his uncle's home. His uncle and him were actually building that home together. So what happened was, one day, as he normally would, he was the one that was coming back to school, and coming in and helping his uncle to build the house. It was like a dome home. It was beautiful. It was absolutely amazing. Uh, Ultimately, what happened was, when he came in on a normal day, at least he thought as a normal day, he was the first person on scene, and then his uncle had died by suicide, and so he was the first one to see that. So he
Oh,
was he was shaken up,
yeah.
and
Ha-
you kind of think to yourself, well, now this is not just about lack of motivation. Like,
yeah.
this kid, he's He's down and out. You know, his life is crumbled right before him. The very person who he loved so dearly, person who he spent probably hours with every single day, that that connection was broken, and
Mm.
uh, he was hurt.
How old was he?
17, 17.
Whoa.
What do I do in this situation? And this was, I'm sitting down at the table, and of course, first, I give my condolences and everything of that nature. But I'm very solution based, and I don't even know if that was the right time to do it, but it was. But apparently, it did. It worked out. Um, I remember I looked at the three of them, and I said, "Look, one of the biggest issues you have is waking up in the morning." He says, "Yes." So okay. Parents, you can't wake him up. No, we leave early for work at like 6 a.m. and he has to be up by like 7:30, something like that, 7:30. I can't remember the exact times in order for him to be at school for 8, or I can't remember what time school started anymore. It's been so long. But I basically said, because it took me about 30 minutes to get to work anyway. So I said I'm willing to take another 15-minute detour, drive to his house every day, knock on his door. He has to wake up. I said, if that's your biggest issue, is just getting to the building, so I'm gonna knock on your door every single day. And make sure you get up. You have to look at me, Mr. St. Louis. I'm up. All right, let's go. Kind of like drill sergeant type thing. I was like, let's go. Come on, man, let's go. And then he would wake up, and sometimes he would follow me if he was pretty much like in a sense quick to get ready, or at least I knew he was up, and he was a man who really respected the fact that I did this right in order to make sure that he succeeded, and so he wasn't gonna just like wake up and go back to bed. So for 3 months I did that every single day. Knocked on the door, knocked on the door. My teachers, I had people tell me, Brian, you're doing too much, man. Like this is like this is crazy. And I mind you, I'm still getting there on time. I'm still getting there before my teachers. But they knew what I was doing. They're like, Brian, it's too much on you, man. I was like, no. And the thing was, for me, in my head, I was like, I'm going to do what needs to be done in order for this kid to succeed. And I know I can't do that for everybody. I'm not gonna knock on every single kid's door. That's not what I'm saying. But he has a specific situation that I think could use some intentionality, like special intentionality. So I did that. I did that from January to basically March. Did that for 3 months straight. Uh, so I give that story so you understand what's going on. Um, August of 2016 now, this is 4 years before that January hit. I got a call. I said I got a call. I get into school when school started and everything, and my birthday was August 2nd, and school started early for us. Like we started, I want to say end of July, because we had bigger breaks throughout the year. I I came in, my wife comes in and she surprises me with my birthday and all the kids, and I'm like, oh man, this is awesome, this is amazing, and we're having a really good time. And I remember I get home and she gives me like these two boxes, and the two boxes are basically one that actually looked very beautiful, the other that was very like broken down and dingy. And that's of course my eyes. I'm always attracted to things that look great, and so I was like, oh yeah, let me get this, let's get this nice box. And I open it, it's a beautiful wash. This one actually. This is this nice wash that we had,
Oh.
and it's kind of broken up right now. I'm not gonna lie, but that's why it's a timepiece. I don't barely even use it. Um, but it's always kept away from me. And so I'm like, man, I don't even need this other box. Nothing can get better than this or whatever. And she was like, Brian, just open the box. Okay, so I open the box and there's like a yellow onesie in it. I'm like, what the heck is this? Like, I swear,
Oh.
I, I was so oblivious. It took me like, I want to say 10 seconds. And I just fell on the bed and I was like, oh my gosh. She went to the birthday party. She said when she was driving home, she felt weird. And she was like, "Hey, is this really it?" And so she went to go get the pregnancy test, and she found out the day of my birthday that she was pregnant. So it was, I was blown away, man. I was I was completely blown away. Um, Spent like a month, 2 months. Every day I would come home, I'd take that onesie and put it on my shoulder, and it was just like I was proud, I was gonna be a father. This was I want to say I was 26 at the time, and so just things were just moving. It just felt like everything was great. Like every when we found out it was a girl, that was even bigger for me. We did the whole gender reveal. My friends, I mean, I don't even think I've ever shared this part of the story. I had a friend who, in the gender reveal, he got every answer right. Have you ever done like those questionnaires and stuff like that
Yeah.
about the person? They did one for me and one for her. No one got all answers right. Even I think my wife got an answer wrong about me. I think I got one answer wrong about her. But my friend got every single answer right about me.
No way.
And people were like, bro, this is your second wife. I was like, yo, but shut up. But like we were so tight. That's the kind of bond I had with some of my friends and him specifically. He still is just a very just an amazing person to me no matter what. But we had the whole gender reveal, everything. It was absolutely amazing. And then my dog died. My dog died in, I want to say, November of that year, so 2016. He got hit by a car. And it was one of those situations I was just I was very broken up over. And but at the end of the day, it's like you have to keep moving on, right? Both of them had jumped out of the house, and they were still like super young. And I went to go chase them, but they kept running away, so I had to go find them. And then ended up one got hit by a car, the other one I was able to pick up, but I didn't see the other one get hit by a car. Um, I got the call like 30 minutes later. I kept looking around, so it was a very sad situation. But and there's a reason why I share this as well. You'll understand it later. But I do all of this, and we're going through life. January comes, the student is now here, and I'm doing all that work with my student. We find out as well from before that Cornelia is supposed to be born on April 7th, and April 7th is our wedding anniversary. So we find out that she's pregnant on my birthday. She's going to be born on our anniversary, and honestly felt like a movie. When and we get to this point, end of January, I want to say beginning or end of January that month, though, I get promoted to the principal position as the administrator. Everything just felt like it was aligned. Things were moving forward. More money was coming into the house. Things were I felt like I was completely in my purpose and my job. My wife was doing well at her job. Things were just at a place where it flowed very well. March 15th comes about, and I'm at a principal's meeting. I get a call, my wife, and basically says, "Hey, Brian, I think I have bricks and hacks." Or she thinks I think I might be going into labor, but it could be bricks. Is it bricks and hacks? I think
Braxton Hicks.
Braxton. Every time I tell the story,
It's all
I
good. You
always,
didn't have him.
I know, I know I did not have that. So yeah, Braxton Hicks. I always say bricks and hacks. What the heck? But yeah, Braxton Hicks, and I'm like, are you sure? Like, are you sure you're just not actually in labor? She's like, well, maybe we should just, maybe I'll wait it out and we'll see. I was like, maybe we should just go to the hospital just be in case, just to be safe. She's like, yeah, yeah, let's go. So she goes. I drive because I'm about 2, 3 hours away because I was at a meeting for all principals, and I come through. I'm driving, and as I'm driving, my wife is like, yeah, this is it, this is it. I'm like, cool, cool, cool. So I'm driving. My wife, I'm sorry, my mom gives me a call. Or no, actually, I called my mom because she didn't know. And I'm like, yeah, mom, this is it. She's like, oh, it's coming to a couple of weeks. I was like, yeah, but I mean, a couple of weeks is nothing serious, right? Um, March 15th from April 7th, we're not looking at anything that's too serious there at that point. Um, I get there to the hospital though, and when I got to the hospital, the doctor that was there, he basically says that my wife's blood pressure was around like 170, 180 something, over 110 or 120, something of that nature. It was very, I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was absolutely alarming.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, what does that mean? He says, well, we're monitoring her very, very, very well. We just want to make sure that everything is moving well with this. We're here to watch her through it, and we're okay. I said, okay, no worries. As my wife is there, my sister-in-law was there first, and then she had to go. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh, babe, everything's gonna be okay. I'm touching her hand. She's like, Brian, shut up, don't do that stuff. I was just like, my fault, my fault. I tried to be like her sister, did not work. I was like, okay, I already know I'm just gonna be me. Let's just keep doing as we normally do. And it things were moving along, but she wasn't dilating very well. Doctor basically says to me, "Hey, Brian, we're probably gonna have to do an emergency C-section." But he says it in a way where he says, I believe this will be the needed step, if you understand what I'm saying." And I'm like, okay. So I kind of got like this gist from him, and so I told my wife, "Hey, I think we should do the emergency C-section." And she was like, "No, I really wanted to do this naturally. I really wanted a natural birth." I said, I understand that, but I think it's probably better for us to take on to this next step." And she took a little bit, it's not too much time, but just to think it through, and she was like, "Okay, let's do it." So we get into the emergency C-section room, and while that while everything's getting ready, I remember even one of my students called me and was like, "Hey, is she here yet?" I'm like, "No, no, no, not yet." I was like, "Oh, I'll let you know when it's time." He was one of my closest students. He was 18 at the time too. He still calls me to this day sometimes. But um, yeah, it was one of those kids that I really poured into, and he always just wanted to see things go well for me. So I get into the emergency room, I get everything ready, and I remember I actually watched the whole procedure. And I don't recommend anybody doing that because it's very graphic. But I watched from the moment that I walked in, I watched the whole thing, and uh, I remember like even my wife and I were like kind of laughing about some stuff and just talking it through, and but she's on quite a bit of drugs because of the high blood pressure that was done. So it came out to be that was severe preeclampsia. And then and so in all of that, she's working through it. I'm there with her and the doctors. I'm just like, "Hey, how's things? Looking great, looking great." I'm like, "Cool." Uh, and so it gets to the point where they're like, "Hey, have a seat. We're ready in about 1 minute." I'm like, "Cool." I sit down. They do the last cut, and they open her up fully. And I remembered uh, looking up, and like I saw her like when they took her out, and she was she looked very beautiful. She was like a it was weird. It was like an angel, like in a sense that I saw. Um, and it was, I've never shared this one before. I've never shared this part before. Growing up, I used to be called ugly a lot. Um, and like, it was just, it did play on my insecurities. As I got older, I know I feel like things changed, but it didn't, it didn't still always internalize into myself personally. And so I had a lower self-esteem for many years, but it came to the place where I built that up, and so it's hard to take away from me because of how much I've put into to like build myself up as a person and to always see the value and worth that I am. Um, but there was always this sadness or like this thought in my head that maybe she would be like, and it's really weird to say it like that, but maybe she'd be like ugly or something like that, or not turn out as a cute baby, because of me and all of this different stuff. And I remember looking at her and she was just gorgeous. Like it was just beautiful. I was like, wow, like this baby, like this is our child. Like I can't believe I'm looking like I'm gonna be a father. Uh, but then it was about like 20 seconds after that I saw her kind of like gasp. Um, and we were waiting for that cry, but it never came. And so waited about 5 minutes, waited about 10 minutes, waited about 30 minutes. I even got to the place where I was like pleading, in a way, but I wasn't, there was no, I believed up until the very moment, very end, that she would still survive. But it took me a lot because I was even pleading like if I need to die myself in order for her to live or something of that nature. I was like, whatever needs to happen for her to live, uh, it, it's what needs to be done. And about 40, it was 45 minutes. They stopped. I saw the doctors stop. I saw the nurses stop. Nurses start crying, and the doctors start coming towards me to tell me that basically she's passed away. Um, and I already knew what they were gonna tell me. I just told them, give me 1 second. And my wife looked at me and said, babe, is everything okay? And I told her, I said, everything is going to be okay. I remember those words very vividly because I already understood what the situation was, but she wasn't seeing anything. I'm the only one who actually saw everything that was happening for those 45 minutes because she was basically fighting for her own life too. We didn't fully understand that until a few hours later. But yeah, she I asked them to send her back to the room and they carted her out the room. And the second that door closed, because I just felt like I didn't want to cry that cry in front of my wife because of the fact that she just had that procedure. Like the second that door closed, I cried a cry that I can't replicate. And it was deep. It was I felt broken. Um, and like I held onto her body and I remember just like the warmth of my child. And it was one of those moments that you really don't want anyone to ever have to feel. And to this day, I don't ever want anyone to ever have to feel that type of pain. So when all of that happened, my wife and and I'm just gonna kind of actually no, this is important to the story. As all of that was happening, that same night, I'm not gonna say who, but somebody came to my room. Um, and I want to tell you, this is not even 12 hours later. Somebody basically said that the reason why she died is because I wasn't spiritual enough. Yeah. Uh, I had left pastoral ministry, and so like that was the reason. Um, I had people who called me and said, "Yo, you're a man. Don't worry about this kind of stuff. Like this is your wife's pain. This is not your pain. You just got to be there for your wife." Um, even I had someone say, "Man, at least you're gonna get a lot of money from this. You could sue the hospital."
Oh my God.
And I was like, "Yo, what?" When people talk about when when people ask me why I go so hard for empathy, it's not just because of me. It really isn't. And the reason why I shared the backstory of me working at the school at the juvenile, it's because it taught me that there's always a story behind why people do what they do. You don't, it doesn't excuse their behavior. Sorry, it doesn't enable behavior or excuse behavior, actually, as well. It explains behavior. And that was the biggest part for me was I'm going through the worst pain of my life.
Mhm.
And it felt like there was just a lack of that empathy.
Mhm.
And it wasn't the word that I even chose at the time, but it was it was what I felt. Years later, I know that that's what it is. It's empathy, but um, it you didn't think that with that type of pain would come people around you
No.
who would also add on to it so much.
Mm-mm.
Um, and
Mm-mm.
I've forgiven, had some friends who didn't come to the funeral I wished were there. I've let go and forgiven a lot, even in the midst of that. I'm talking about like in a week to 2 weeks time of having certain conversations with people because I knew if I didn't, it would spiral me and it wouldn't do well for my wife. So I was like, man, I got to find my own peace in this because that's what matters most at this point is taking care of me and my wife. Like, if I'm not good, then she won't be good. So we got to be good for each other. And so I knew some of the things that were happening were very necessary in order for me to deal with it in that immediate situation. But it was that chicken noodle soup, man. And chicken noodle soup, I'll explain what that is. I had a this pastor that was supposed to meet me, never knew me before. We were supposed to have a meeting because I was looking to create a board for my school and I wanted to get community leaders involved with it. Uh, and I told him I said I can't make it because I have the situation I just dealt with. I'll meet you in like maybe a couple of weeks or a month when I'm back into work. He got my address from someone he knows, um, like a good person that a good friend of mine, and he drove all the way to my house, and I think he lived like 45 minutes to an hour away from me. And he knocks on the door, and I'm like, I don't know who this person is because we actually never saw each other face to face. It was always it was like actually just on email. And so I'm like, hello? And he's like, I'm Pastor, and I can't even remember his name. I feel so bad for that, but I think it was like Pastor Adam or something like that. And I was like, oh, sorry about that. I was like, hey, how you doing? And it was so quick. I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but there are some pastors who, when they come in, it's like they got to pray with you. They got to do all these different things. Next thing you know, it's like a 30-minute to an hour thing. The dude spent 30 seconds. He was like, listen, I heard about what happened, hearing about what happened. I just wanted to bring you this chicken noodle soup that my wife and I made specifically for you and your family. Just know we're praying for you. Here you go. Have a wonderful day. He said, well, just know we're praying for you, man. And just left. And I was like, the heck? Like, I was so confused, but I was taken aback. And I remember putting that chicken noodle soup on the table for me and my wife. And I was like, yo, should we eat it? And she was like, I don't know. I was like, what if it's poison? We're just like laughing about it. I remembered. I promise you right now, I'm talking about this chicken noodle soup and I could taste it in my head.
Tasty.
That was the best chicken noodle soup I've ever had in my life. And I know it had to do with the whole situation, but
Oh.
it's because you felt the love come out of that so deeply that someone was
Mhm.
willing to go to that extent, um, who never even knew me, never just heard about what's going on, and did that for us. And to this day, the best chicken noodle soup I've ever had in my life. Uh, it was like a contrast of empathy that others gave. The actual, remember, because we talked about how empathy or the radical empathy is the action based. The doing something like, yeah, I could share in your feelings. And I feel like there were a lot of people who did share in my feelings, but there weren't a lot of people who did that action. And that action was just like, whoa, that was amazing that somebody did that for me. But the action that saved my life was was a few months later going into school. I went back into, you know, just all in school mode. I was, especially as a new principal, I was just completely entrenched in my work and I didn't want to think about it too much. So I just focused completely on my students, on my work. And and I want to say it was May or so. My students came through with like this thing in their arms. I was like, what are you guys doing? And they came through and the kid who I had knocked on that door every single day for 3 months, he comes in with this dog.
Oh,
He's like, Mr. St. Louis, we can't replace your daughter, but after everything that happened with you, even losing your dog before, and um, we just wanted to give you this. You've been there for us so much. You've given so much to us. This is just like a small token of appreciation to just say we love you and this is what we want.
oh,
And I thought it was led by like the teachers or supervisors or my boss. It was his initiative.
oh,
He's the one that started the whole thing, got everyone else involved, and then took care of it. And they even messed me up because um one time he asked me to come by to this place and we looked at dogs and I was like, man, that's a nice dog. I was like, I'm probably not gonna get it because it was expensive. And I was like, I'm not gonna get that thing, but I was like, that's a nice dog, man. And they did all, and I had no idea the whole time of everything that was going on. So months afterwards, after school's done, June ends, school's done, my wife goes on a trip to Anguilla and she tells me, Bryan, I don't want to go on this trip unless you come. And I'm like, I can't because school's not done yet. Like she left on the Friday, but graduation was on Sunday. And her friends, one of her best friends' wedding was on that Sunday. I'm like, go, man, go, go, go. I'm fine. I'm okay. I'm okay. Don't worry about me. Of course not. I thought I was fine, but I clearly wasn't. Uh, it was quiet for the first time and since the situation happened. And so Monday I was by myself completely. And after situations like these happen, people they don't call as much. They don't check in as much anymore.
mhm.
Bryan also is very strong. He spoke at the funeral. He like I couldn't ever speak at at the death of my daughter's funeral. Like Bryan is just a strong man. He got this. Like if there's anybody who can go through this, it's him. Those are the things that people are saying. Um, and Monday I literally sat on my couch the whole time, just crying the whole day. Um, the Office was playing. That's probably why I have a very strong connection to The Office. I was crying the whole day. Tuesday is crying the whole day, just sitting on the couch. Wednesday, it's crazy because I had thought about buying a gun a month prior to, just because I'm in the States, I'm in Indiana. Everyone has a gun. I was like, yeah, I used to go to the range all the time too before all of that kind of stuff happened. I was training. I was gonna purchase my gun that I really wanted. Something told me with a loud voice when I was at the counter, don't buy that gun. And I was just like, what the heck? I was like, maybe it's just because I don't I don't want to like spend the money because those are kind of expensive. It was like, don't buy that gun. It was so loud. And I was just like, all right, whatever, I'll buy it later. Um, and I never ended up buying it later. But now a month prior to or a month forward, and on that Wednesday, I never forgot that feeling. Because I was suicidal at that point. And I never forgot that feeling because it was weird. I always thought that suicide was like this this frantic, like someone's just not in their right mind, like everything just goes crazy, blah, and then they just do it. And I never forgot. I was like, I felt peace, and I was like, oh, if I go, I wouldn't feel this pain anymore. And the pain just felt like it was about to leave. And I'll tell you right now, if I had access to a gun, I wouldn't be here today.
Mm.
So, um, I never forgot that thought, that feeling. And then because I thought it, I started crying even more. But then the dog just kept licking my face and and just kept like it just kept bothering me even more and more and just kept bothering me and like wanting to like do more and walk and licking my face. And I went from like this depression and like just complete sadness to sometimes laughing because of this crazy dog. And
You.
I say to this day, without the radical empathetic choice that one student made to set that up, Bryan St. Louis would most likely not be alive right now. And so, radical empathy is it's everything to me. Uh, I didn't know I was using it before, and I couldn't formulate the words of what that was at during that time. But yeah, that's what saved me. And so for me, I see how powerful empathy is as a tool to be used, and it doesn't have to be only for these serious situations like these that I've dealt with or that he dealt with, right? But it's it's a tool that we can all use to really care for one another, support one another, be there for one another, see, understand others' perspectives, why what's going on in their lives can help us to view their perspective a little bit better. And that radical empathetic approach is what do I do now that I know all this information? And what can I do to be an action or to use an action to help support this person in a way that's going to be tangible, in a way that will actually help them in their lives. So when people say, like when I hear, sadly enough, I think we've talked about this, like I'm a Christian, but when I hear Christians now talking about how empathy is toxic and when I
Oh.
hear people talk about how like empathy is evil and or
What?
it's not necessary, I'm like, you guys really have no idea what
Hmm.
you're talking about.
Hmm.
Um, and I've only seen how empathy can help create a culture for people to be more understanding with one another, to build stronger relationships and develop and understand and build those unifying ties with one another, but also help in a tangible way for people
Hmm.
around them. So,
Thank you. Thank you for
uh,
telling all of that
thank,
to us, honestly. I'm
yeah, and
Yes.
so
thank you
sorry.
for holding space for it too, and just allowing me to be able to express that in a way that I really only know how. So, but yeah, thank you for that. Appreciate that.
Say it's honestly our pleasure. This is why we this is why we are here. This is why we
Yeah.
created
Yeah.
this. I don't even know if I can find the right words, but how deeply sorry I am that you and your wife endured what you did,
Mm,
um, from start to finish, all of it, all of the things, all of the
Yeah.
details that you shared, the
yeah.
lack of empathy that you were experiencing, the all of it. I'm just so deeply sorry for you having gone through that. And
I appreciate it.
also, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, no, I said I appreciate that. That's it.
And I also am blown away by the all of the connections and all of like I'm just blown away and we're really grateful that you're here.
Yes, we are
So
really grateful that you're here.
thank you, student. Thank you, puppy.
Yeah.
Holy. Go
Yeah, I
ahead,
agree.
Sammy. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say that too, similar, probably not so eloquently, but similar, that I'm really sorry you went through all of that, and not only the loss of a child, but also, like Melissa said, the lack of support and empathy that went on the other side of it. And like grateful that that one pastor, and I'm sure there's a couple others that were empathetic and supportive, but it's so hard when people around you, especially the people who are the closest to you and are supposed to be the most empathetic and understanding, aren't. I may be making an assumption there, but
No, you're on it. You're definitely on it. But I do want to add something there that I forgot to say. And I don't always share this. I try not to, like, it's my wife, of course, but at the end of the day, I try not to speak for her because her experience, as much as we did it together, it's still different. It's we saw things differently. She even came out of her mouth to say she thinks I was traumatized more. I was like, nah, you crazy. I was like, but she was like, but you saw it. You saw
mm-hmm.
the 45 minutes. No one else saw that.
Yeah.
Um, and and I think I don't know. I don't try to who the level of things, but I will say, like, again, I would never want anyone to have to see like their child trying to survive for that long. One of the things that my wife and I did though, we were in a car maybe a week or so after this happened, and I remember we looked at each other and I told her 6 months. She was like, "What do you mean 6 months?" I said, "6 months. You and I will not do, say, or anything to hurt each other in any way, shape, or form." Uh, and and she was like, "Okay." And it's not like we're out here, hurting each other on a regular basis. That's not
No.
what it is. But sometimes when you do something that's really annoying, or you say that thing, and it probably wasn't the right thing to say at the right time,
Mhm.
and it annoys your partner, annoys your spouse. I was like 6 months intentionality that we do not do anything. We're very careful, and I tell you right now, um, I can't ever go back to the time and think about anything negative that correlates to my wife. And she has said the same thing for me. So our relationship, and I was very crucial, or very, uh, not crucial, committed to that because I've heard so many people uh,
Mhm.
who've divorced after a loss like that. And I was like,
Mm.
that's not gonna be our story. I can't control what happened to her because my our daughter died. She died from what you call Bacterial syndrome, and so there were certain parts of her body that did not form properly, and so a lot of waste and toxins were just continuously
Oh.
circulating inside her system, and they were never expelling. So uh so she was probably suffering, to be honest, quite a bit
Oh.
between all that time while she was in the womb. I never really even thought about that. Um, but but in that, uh, I can't control that part, right? Like we can't control the fact that once she was cut from my wife, like that's basically what kept her alive the whole time. But what we can control are the things that happen afterwards, our reactions. I was drinking a little bit during that time as well. Uh, I'm not a drinker, but there was just every time we went out, I always had a drink, and then we were going out every night. So basically, every night I had a drink. Uh, and I remembered about like 3 months after that, I say God, it was just like, "Are you good?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "All right, stop drinking." I was like, "All right, cool." It was that audible. It was weird. It was that audible. I heard it because I was about to go back to school for my, as a principal and leader, and I was like, I can't go back to school leading kids and drinking, so I was like, yeah, it's done. And as audible as I heard that, he was like, but it was so interesting because the first thing I heard was, "Are you good?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm okay." And I was like, "All right, stop drinking," and that was it. So, and ever since then, I only drink when I go to weddings. But my
Mm.
wife and I, like, tight since then, before, even after, even more, because we were intentional on that very exact point.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you talked about that because that was, if you notice, like when I'm looking down, I'm writing things
Yeah, yeah,
down. And one of
yeah.
the things I was going to ask you about was how you grieve together and how you keep that relationship strong in such a turbulent time. So thank you for answering that
Yeah.
question before I even asked it.
I
Sorry,
crossed
Sam,
off
you go
some
ahead.
No, I was gonna say I crossed off questions too. I was like, oh, he's
Yeah.
answering this. I'll cross that
Oh,
off.
thank you.
Great. No, I want to just honor what you said though, Bryan, about you both having very different stories because
Mm-hmm.
it is incredibly true.
Yep.
And I know that I don't want to like turn this about me in any way, shape, or form, but we've had two very different, defined traumatic things, just as me and my
Yep.
husband. And one of them, I was like, it's fine, keep going. And my husband was like, you did not see it from my perspective. Like, and it
Hmm.
was similar to what he watched the whole craziness of all the lives at risk. And I was just I didn't know. And so he was he would not say traumatized, but yeah, he was. And then another one where I was the one who was severely traumatized by it, and he saw it, but it was from a different perspective, and so he
Hmm.
wasn't. And so I just want to honor that because you're absolutely right. Like your wife is right in that yes, she physically went through these things, but you watching can have a significantly worse impact on you. And I shouldn't say worse, different
It's just yeah,
traumatic
different. Yeah.
impact, different traumatic impact for you in a different way. Not worse, but maybe mentally more traumatic than physically. So I just want to honor that piece for both of you.
Yeah,
Definitely right.
the thing about her, there are a lot of times that I've seen people who have tried to make a pain about them,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and she never did that. She never for one moment made it seem as though this was more for her or more about her than me. It was
Mm.
always us. It was always us, and how
Wow.
do we move together as a family from this? Um,
Wow.
yeah, I honor my wife deeply because of that. I mean, everyone has their issues in their marriages and such, but yeah, Keziah, I just want to be very clear on who I'm talking about too. Keziah, she's been so amazing through all of this, and I mean, I also think I've been I can't speak for her on that, but we've just been amazing for each other to work through that situation, and it still comes up.
Of
Still comes
course.
up.
Of course.
I feel like it happened last year. That's how it always feels. Anytime I share it, every time I talk about it, it feels like it happened last year. It feels like
Mm.
it happened that recently.
Yeah.
And one of the worst things that I hate hearing people say, "Oh, you got kids now, man. You good?" Like,
Ah,
no, man. You can't.
mute my mic.
No, it's okay. That's yeah, I love my boys. Of course, I love my boys. You can't take away what you lost though, and that was a
Mhm.
child.
Yeah.
Uh, all those
Yeah.
experiences, you know, uh, I I grieved for everything also that you th thought you were going to have. Um, so in the hospital, they gave us time to spend with like just the body, but they had to like what do you call it? I forgot the process. They had to like not freeze, but like it was that way in order for you to actually just sit with the like they say like you have two options. Some people don't take it, some people do. And I went back and forth with it. I was like, nah, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. At least I don't think I did at first. I felt like I was like, nah, she's dead. Like I don't want. But uh, I can't even remember to be that part. I don't remember as much. I just I feel like I didn't, but I think my wife did. And so I was just like, yeah, for sure. Like if that's what you need, like let's do that. But I'm really happy we did, no matter what, because in that period of time, and it wasn't long, but in that period of time, uh, it was weird. I not weird, but I thought about everything that I knew was never going to happen, and like I kind of like stood up, did a little bit of like a dance. Sometimes I was like in my head mentally, I was just like, yeah, It's the only time I'm ever gonna dance with her.
Oh,
Um, this is the only time I'm gonna laugh with her. We even were cracking jokes about certain things, and I more so than my wife because I'm more of the dark humor sometimes. But like in those moments, you realize you will never experience everything that you know you could. So yeah, that was also something that I don't like when people say because no matter what, that's the child, right? And
yeah,
now Levi is Levi. If something happened to Levi, I wouldn't be like, well, at least I have Luke. Uh, Like,
of
like,
course.
like these are every individual child is for their experience and for the connection that you have. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can we talk about forgiveness?
Yeah, that's
I
important.
don't even know how to eloquently dive into it, but I
Yeah.
feel like when you first said the things that people were saying to you right off the bat, I had to mute my mic because I was like my I'm pretty sure if we look at my cheeks were going red. Like I was like, what? I can you yeah, I don't know how
Yeah,
to
yeah,
dive
I'll talk
into it or
about it. I'll
ask
talk
an
about it.
eloquent
Yeah.
question other than to dive into the subject of forgiveness. How do you start going about forgiving somebody when what they have said cuts so deeply?
I'll say it like this. And I've grown to understand that forgiveness is not really even for the other person. It's really for you. Uh, the forgiveness that you have that you're able to extend to someone else. And just like from a and I don't want to make this like so much about like biblical concepts or anything of that nature, but
It's
like
okay.
um I've been forgiven for so much that I've done in my life. And so why wouldn't I try to at least extend that forgiveness to other people? Even if it's painful, uh,
Mhm.
I'm still needing to extend that type of forgiveness because I know how much I've been forgiven. Um, it didn't make it easy in
Mhm.
any way, shape, or form. I think I think and in fact I realized that I had to forgive. I never really fully understood like so the Bible talks about how when you forgive it should be 70 times 7, which is there's so many different understandings of what that means, but ultimately just keep on forgiving. I'll just make it as simple as that. That person, or there are some people who did things just one time, but in my heart, I had to like keep forgiving, keep forgiving, keep. It wasn't just a one-time thing. There were times I saw that person again. I'm like, gotta let it go, man. Like, it's not worth your peace. It's not worth uh, how you're able to move on with your day and your life.
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, you can't control other people. And that's one of the biggest things for me is that's why I talk about this so much with my youth and students that I talk to. I don't share this example, but I'm like, yo, you can't control other people. And maybe I
Mhm.
could share the example depending on like the setting, but you cannot control other people.
Mhm.
In that, the only person you can control is yourself and how you choose to react to those situations. And so for me, I understood at a very pivotal moment that if I don't forgive, this is going to also cause chain reactions that would cause more pain to myself
Mhm.
and to my wife. And so if I don't want that, the appropriate and basically only response is actually forgiveness. So yeah,
Yeah.
forgiveness is tough. It's not a one time thing. And I actually hate the concept of forgive and forget
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
it's impossible to forget.
Yeah.
I don't care what anybody says. The only again, sorry, bringing like not
Mm.
sorry, but the only person who can really forget is God. I
Yeah.
can't. That is
Yeah.
embedded within my brain. I will always remember.
Yeah.
I can't forget. I can forgive.
Mhm.
Until I have dementia or Alzheimer's, knock on wood, I don't ever want to have that. I cannot forget.
Yeah.
The only thing I can do is forgive. So I do what I know is in my power, and I don't try to make it so difficult to try to remove it from my brain, which is an impossibility.
Yeah.
So um, even though it took time, the forgiveness aspect was, and I try to say this for people, uh, like forgiveness really is for you. It's you being able to let go pains that others have done, and you being able to move forward
Hmm.
despite the difficulty, and because it's going to be healthy for you. And there are some people who you're forgiving and don't even realize the pains that they've done in the first place.
Yeah.
And there were points of time where I thought I needed someone to say something, because even to this day, I still never heard, "Yo, I'm sorry for saying that." Um, but it's okay.
Mm.
Again, I can't control. I can't control.
Yeah.
Uh, and even if I want it, even though I really don't care for it anymore, but like even if I want it, um, it's not in my control to receive, but it's in my control to give what I can. And so forgive.
Boy. If you take it one step further, if you could describe what what does forgiveness feel like in your body? Like, does it feel like a letting go? Is
I was
that,
just about
if
to
you
say
could describe it to somebody that's like, I've never heard that word before, what does that mean? Is
that.
it a letting go? Is it a peace? Is there a calmness? Like, what does it feel like?
I was literally about to say those two words, or yeah, letting go.
Same.
It's I I basically put it as like a backpack that you're holding onto, and or even let's say I think some people have used the illustration of like a rope
Hmm.
that you're tying your hand on, and you're squeezing and pulling, and but as you're squeezing and pulling, it's actually tightening up your hand even more. And then forgiveness is, letting go, and then ultimately your hand is released, and so there's less tension, there's less pain, on both ends, actually. Even if the other person is still holding onto the rope, they're still not full. You're still not hurting with
Hmm.
the rope anymore. You're not holding the tension with the whole rope anymore, and your hand is now released, and so it is
Oh,
a letting go. And just like the backpack illusion, you're just letting go of the burden, the weight that's holding onto your shoulders. You're letting go of that, so it doesn't hold you down, and wear you down as you keep moving in life. Yeah,
I love that so much. Okay, Sammy, I'm mute.
No, I think it's great that you talked about that because I think it's easy to just talk about forgiveness, but and sometimes because we think the forgive and forget, if we haven't forgotten, we feel like maybe we haven't forgiven. And the
no,
forgiving, just
yeah,
like you said, is you don't forget that it happened. You've just removed the emotions from it affecting you. And it can be a continual thing. Like you said, you
yeah,
maybe have to continue to remind yourself that nope, it's fine. I'm going to love on this person and give this person respect and understanding, even if they haven't given it back to me, and that's okay.
that's right.
Um,
That's right.
yeah, and it's a continual thing for sure. I have two questions for you. One of them is I want to ask, after going through what you and your wife went through with the loss of Cornelia, what was it like for you two having subsequent children?
Hmm. No one's ever really asked it that way. That's good. Good question. First of all, thanks for always saying her name. I love that. Really appreciate that. Second, I want to say when my son was born, Levi, there was so much anxiety. So like there was so much anxiety on that pregnancy. Thank God we were in Canada during this pregnancy. Because my wife, she went to the doctor, I want to say every 2 weeks. She was in the
Yeah.
doctor, she was doing a ultrasound. If we were in the States with that, first of all, we wouldn't have done that because we wouldn't have had the money. Um, but if we did, that would have been like $300,000. I don't even know. Before the pregnancy. Forget about
What?
it. Like if we did an ultrasound every 2 weeks, that's what the doctors were wanting for her to do. We went into the doctor, did an ultrasound the next week. After every time, all right, have a good day, bye. I'm like, man, this can't be real. Like the sense of I was like, wow, I'm so happy we're in Canada right now. Like it just blew my mind. and for those, it's not that I just moved to Canada for that. I'm a Canadian citizen. But but yeah, it's that was when he was born, it was again a very big sense of relief. It was like, okay, this is and the thing that we waited for, it was very interesting. The second he came out, that boy cried. Like it was instant. It wasn't even you didn't have to wait. I don't even think I waited 10 seconds. I think they pulled him out, and again, it was a C-section. She's had three C-sections because of that. Two emergency and two, oh, sorry, one emergency and two scheduled C-sections.
Freaking champion your wife on her
Champion,
recovery.
man. Champ. She's a champ. I can't even, yeah. But yeah, it was, I think he cried like a second after he came out. I was like, man, I was like, thank you for that. I needed to hear that.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's interesting. I hear some people, talk about how they hate when their kids cry. It's so annoying. And I was like, and sometimes I don't make it like so much about me. I just say, hey man, just be grateful, man. That's why I'll just say it like that. Just be grateful. I don't have to say the whole story of anything. I'm like, man, just be grateful, man. Your kid's there, like just be happy. And they're like, yeah,
Hmm.
that's true. But I had a sense of relief when he was born. I had a sense of guilt. I had a sense of like, man, um, I wish like he's still my second born. That's why I always kept feeling that. I was like, he's still my second born. He's still my second born. Um, but I always felt like just really deeply connected. Maybe that's why we're so close. The kid is very affectionate as well too, and I've spent a lot of time with him because of that. Just because of our connection, maybe because of everything that happened. But during COVID, like I would bring him everywhere with me as well. So I do have a special bond with him, probably because of the fact that he was the one that's right after her. But for me, there was a lot of emotions. I would say that the first one was definitely like release. Like I feel good. If I'm happy, finally I heard that cry. Uh, I would say the second one was just I don't think it's guilt, but yeah, I don't think guilt is the question. Sorry, is the answer, but I think I just felt like it just felt like something was missing. I guess that's what I would say. It just felt like something was still missing. Um,
Yeah.
but it never affected, and I made sure to be very careful about that. It never affected. I didn't want him to be haunted by uh, a shadow of someone that he can't be. And so I never wanted him to feel like, oh, there's this child of mine that you have to live up to that I never even got to know like you. Like
Hmm.
you are Levi, and no matter what, you will always be Levi. And I'll never try to put this cast on you for the loss that I've had. I just I just didn't want him to ever have that shadow affect the love that he deserves.
Yeah.
So yeah, we were very intentional about that.
I wanted to ask you that question for two reasons. One, because I wanted to know what it was like. But two, because like you spoke about earlier, people saying, well, you have two other kids, it's fine now. And it's like, but there's, aside from the loss, there's so much more that goes into those two other kids
Mm,
after a loss, right? Because of that intentionality that someone who didn't experience that loss doesn't have to deal with, doesn't have to go through, because it's not, you're unaware. You're unaware of that if you haven't experienced loss or almost loss or anything like that. You don't think about those kinds of things. So I want to say that for that reason, because like those people can hear that
Mhm.
if they listen.
I I want to say that you have such a beautiful way of speaking about people, and I'm so
Hmm.
grateful for it. Like the way that you speak about your wife and the way
Mm.
that you speak about your students and the way that you speak about your children, all of them, is so beautiful. And I really admire it, and I'm grateful for the way that you speak.
I
Agreed.
appreciate that. I
Agreed.
went to school
Go
to
ahead, Sam.
learn how to communicate, so I hope I could do that in some.
You are. No, you are absolutely. Go, go
Okay, I
Oh,
ahead,
have
Sam.
one quick question for you, Brian, and then we
oh,
will let you go. My last question is, um, prior to recording this episode, you had chatted about how you spoke at an event that was for bereaved parents, and you were
yeah.
the speaker there, and you told the story differently at that event than you have ever told it before. And I
Mm.
want to ask what you kind of told me in a message, but I'm going to make you say it here. What was it about that event? Like, how did you, how did you share that event? How did you share that story at
Yeah.
the event that was so different from how you share it today or another times that you've shared the story of Cornelia? How did you make that different? What did you do that made it different?
Yeah. So I never spoke to people who've dealt with that type of loss before. And for me, it was very crucial that I do it in such a way that I know would be meaningful and connect to them. And the only way for me to do that is to honor authenticity and to honor what it actually felt like for me. But I did it in such a way where I told a story of someone that had heard about the or that was watching a I almost messed it up. Someone that was watching a movie of the situation that happened to me. And so I basically shared the story in a third person point of view up until the point where, and I didn't go through, I didn't go as in depth as this, but I gave a third person point of view of myself watching the man in the story of this movie of how he lost a child. And until the very end, where basically I told them as I was trying to turn off the TV because it was too hard, and this was right before she like fully passed away. I was like, as I was trying to turn off the TV and I tried to unplug the TV, I couldn't, and the movie kept going, and the play was still moving, and I realized at that very moment that this was actually my life, and I couldn't stop what was going to happen. And the reason why I bring up the movie aspect is because about 10 minutes into the whole situation with me being at the hospital, I remembered like looking around and it felt like an out of body experience. And I was like, dude, is this a freaking movie? Like, is something like about to, oh
Mhm.
yeah, miraculous, boom, or she's alive, or like you're gonna now be with the deepest pain for the rest of your life. I was like, dude, am I in a movie? And it really felt like I was watching someone else. And so this wasn't the movie illustration wasn't uh, something I necessarily came up with. It really was my experience. I felt like this was a movie. Even the whole story. I found out on my birthday. She's supposed to be born on our anniversary. My like just it was just like the picture perfect, absolute greatest story. My wife, even the pregnancy, she felt like it wasn't that big, it wasn't that bad at first, X, Y, and Z. Like the first trimester was terrible, but like afterwards, everything, it was nice and she was looking beautiful the whole time too. I was just like, man, and for it to end like that, it really felt like one of those like horror or thriller or I don't like dramas that
Yeah.
you can't you just gotta feel it. Um, so I shared it in such a way that they listened to someone else's story, not realizing that it was really my story.
Yeah.
And the reason why I did that too is because I know a lot of them a lot of people who go through pains like these, they sometimes feel like people don't understand,
Mhm.
and they don't really get it. And so I'm not gonna lie, I kind of played on that yeah, I might not, oh, he's just a speaker who doesn't really get what I'm going through. And then come to find out, oh shoot, this guy was with me. Like he was there this whole time. He understands where we're coming from. And yet I still don't think I fully understand what everyone's coming from because everyone has their own story and perspective. I feel like it's just again, what do we try to understand from the story?
Yeah.
You'll never fully get everything, but
No.
at least you try. And I think that that's the whole message behind radical empathy. Just try, man. Uh, just try to be a good person. Try to be more compassionate. I've come up with a tagline just recently, like 2 nights ago. Radical empathy forces us to try to understand the person before we judge the person. And,
Ooh.
and so it's it's one of those things where it is you have to. If and why people are trying to run from empathy is because it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for me to try to actually walk within that person's shoes. I remember uh I think 2 months after she passed away, I saw on the news a man from, was it Syria? I think it was Syria. I think it was one of the Syria bombings that were happening at the time. And I saw him clutching both of his children who were dead in his arms. And I was like, as much as I understand what it feels like to lose a kid, that man just lost two from a bombing and one time. And it kind of woke me up a little bit, to be honest. Uh, And I, again, just looking at his perspective, what must life be like for him right now? Yeah, he's actually had those two kids for at least, because they looked at least anywhere from 3 to 6 years old. And so, again, it just forces us to understand first before we judge people. And a lot of people want to do the judging without the understanding. So, for me, I'm just at a place where when I look at the world around us and where we're moving towards, we're running from accountability, we're running from understanding, we're running from connection to society, and how can we do the best that we can in order for us to bring that back in some way, shape, or form?
Yeah.
So yeah,
Oh man, Bryan. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. Like honestly, we're incredibly grateful for you
Yes.
opening up and sharing with us
we're
everything about your story, about you and your wife and Korneliah and your kids and how that's impacted you and how you've used that to make an impact with others. So I think also the way
Mhm.
that you went about telling that story at that event where it was like the movie, I think that
Yeah.
probably, I'm totally speculating here, but like if someone's walking into that event with their own bereavement, with their own grief, and someone walks up onto stage to tell their story, and that's how you know it's going, you're going to be defensive of like, well, your story's not my story.
Mhm.
Whereas when you're telling it like it's a movie, like you're this person who watched this movie, they're going to connect with that movie.
Yes.
And then at the end, they connect with you. Versus if you started off about you, it's harder for them to connect because they're going to be like, well, you don't know me, you didn't experience me. But if you're just a person watching a movie, it's a very different connection
different.
that
Yeah.
they're going to create there. So
In fact,
um
somebody told me, they were like, I've been, because they've been doing this for many years. They've gone to like these types of events for bereavement. I think she said for like 15 or 20 years. And she was like, I've never had someone come in and speak the way that you did about such a tense cause. And
mhm.
she was like, thank you for that. So I hope, at least for most people, it was a it was a good way to be able
Mhm.
to talk about such a topic that uh, is very painful to speak on or to
Yeah.
experience on. So
Yeah.
yeah, but thank you for that.
Thank you.
Oh my
Thank you so
gosh.
much, Bryan. Honestly, we're so grateful for your time and
I
for the
appreciate
second
it.
time
Yeah.
and for sharing so much with us.
No worries. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. To help support the growth of this podcast, please feel free to leave us a review, follow us on socials, or recommend us to your friends. Your support honestly means the world to us. With love, Sammy and Melissa.